Welcome to the Courageous Conversations podcast, hosted by me, Hannah Chadwick, the director and founder of Fortitude Training. In each episode, I'll be sharing my tales, tips, and techniques with the hope that they'll help you make your work life more positive and productive. I hope you're able to find the hidden gems that you can learn from and utilise to positively impact both your personal and professional life. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics like workplace culture, well-being, diversity, leadership, and team building. Episodes will be a mixture of me sharing stories from my own personal and professional experience, and me interviewing guests, where they're sharing their lived experience insights. I hope you're able to find the hidden gems that you can utilise to positively impact your personal and professional life. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Courageous Conversations podcast. To those of you who've been faithfully riding with me on this journey, thank you and welcome back. And to those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show and decide to tune in again. And whether you are a new or returning listener, please don't forget to subscribe on your preferred platform so that you'll never miss an episode. And whilst you're there, why not leave a rating or review? And whilst on the subject, I want to extend a big thank you to listeners Casey Noddy and J. George Pinnard for the lovely reviews that you guys left on Apple Podcasts. Well, let's kick off today's show in the usual fashion. So we'll be starting off with the rundown of some good news stories from this past week. Then we'll get into today's courageous conversation, 6 signs it's time to quit your job. And then we've got Hero of the Week. And finally, the positive note. This is the rundown. This week saw the timeless Phil Collins track In the Air Tonight climb back into the top 20 of the music charts, almost 40 years since its release. And that's all thanks to 2 YouTubers, twin brothers Tim and Fred Williams. The twins have been broadening their musical horizons, uploading YouTube videos of themselves reacting to songs from classical artists that they've not previously encountered. The clip of the brothers going wild when they reach the drum solo in the song has been viewed over 4 million times. It's great to see the 22-year-olds appreciating music from the likes of Aerosmith, The Carpenters, Lauryn Hill and Dolly Parton, to name just a few. It just goes to show that good music is timeless and can be appreciated by young and old. Next up, here in the UK, supermarket chain Morrisons have said that they're looking to replace their plastic bags for life with paper alternatives. The retailer said ditching plastic bags for life altogether would save 3,510 tonnes of plastic waste per year. The number of single-use plastic bags distributed by major supermarkets in England has fallen by 95% since the carrier bag charge was introduced in 2015. However, millions of plastic bags for life are still issued annually, and many of those still only get used once. And in the US, presidential hopeful Joe Biden announced Senator Kamala Harris as his vice presidential pick if he's successful in the November election. If Biden is successful in his bid for the presidency, that would make Harris the first female and first black vice president in history. Now it's time for today's courageous conversation. 6 signs it's time to quit your job. So if you listen to previous episodes of the podcast, or if you follow my content on LinkedIn, you know that I'm quite vocal about some of the not so great experiences I've had previously in the workplace. Likewise, I also like to share the valuable lessons that I've learned over the years, as I'm a firm believer that all situations, good or bad, still serve to teach us something if we pay close enough attention. Those experiences are precisely what led me to start my own business, helping other organisations to avoid those pitfalls and to just create better workplace experiences for all of us. Now let's be clear, not every experience I've had was a bad one. In fact, it's only right that I should shout out Andy Fisher and Pam Kenworthy OBE from Howells Direct Solicitors, which still is hands down the best job I've ever had. I learned so many valuable lessons, from having a truly inclusive and diverse workforce to what good leadership looks like. I was really sad to leave there, and I only left because I'd had my daughter and the commute was just too much from where I lived. That said, I've also had plenty of jobs where I just knew deep down that they weren't the right fit. The titles may have sounded impressive, but the jobs certainly weren't for me. There are a plethora of reasons why your job might not be the right fit for you. And much like staying in a bad relationship, staying in the wrong job doesn't just hurt you. It can be unfair on your employer and on your colleagues if you're not really emotionally checked in and you're just not really giving it your all. It will most certainly hurt your friends and family, as who do you think is going to have to deal with you behaving like a bear with a sore head, or having to listen to you constantly moaning about how much you hate your job? And most of all, you lose out. According to a study by the AAT, the average person spends 85,000 hours at work over the course of their career. Do you really want to while away all those hours in a job that you despise? Is that ultimately going to benefit you or your employer or those around you? Probably not. I'm going to try and help you distinguish between the small niggling feeling and the big red warning signs so you can decide if you need to be thinking about heading for the exit. Number 1, it's more than just the Sunday night blues. We've all had the feeling. It usually hits around 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. You've been happily enjoying your 2 days of freedom, and then suddenly the dread starts to sink in that in 12 hours' time you'll be getting ready for work, or maybe even already on the way to work. It certainly puts a downer on the rest of your night, and it makes it harder to enjoy the last few hours before you go and rest your weary head to start the work week once again. This is quite normal, unless you have a particularly amazing job that you just can't get enough of. But if you're feeling downright depressed or even physically unwell at the thought of going back to work and you're living for the weekend, maybe you need to rethink your position. Number 2, you've checked out. If you're seriously lacking in motivation to even meet the most basic requirements of your role, let alone delivering an outstanding performance, you're probably hurting both yourself and your employer. Your lack of productivity probably won't have gone unnoticed, and it may even be impacting your other colleagues too. Your negative attitude could be rubbing off on your colleagues, or you may be rubbing them up the wrong way because they're having to pick up the slack from your lack of productivity. Do yourself and your employer a favour by doing the right thing and finding something more stimulating that engages your interest. Number 3, you feel uninspired by your leaders. Remember at the beginning where I talked about my best job ever. Why was it the best? Well, one of the reasons was because we had excellent examples of leadership from the top down. Leaders who actually knew your name and who took the time to engage in conversation with you. I've worked in far too many places where those at the top give off an air of self-importance. When they're not hiding away in their offices, they strut past you and won't even make eye contact, let alone spare you a few words. They don't have a clue what your name is, what department you work in, or what your job role is. Because frankly, you're not important enough for them to care. They often don't even put in a token appearance to welcome new recruits to the organisation during their induction. If you're feeling misaligned with the leaders in your organisation, there are plenty of inspiring leaders out there who I'm sure would value employees who even care about the connection between leadership and the workforce. Number 4, you feel your contribution is ignored or undervalued. There's nothing worse than working your socks off for little or even no recognition. Big or small, it still hurts, and it may be a sign that you need to move on if there's continual failure to give credit where credit's due. I remember getting nominated for an award by one of my direct reports. It came completely out of the blue and got emailed through to me when I was out of the office, but it was a pleasant surprise when I came back. But I never received my certificate, nor did my manager even mention or acknowledge it. It certainly took the shine off something that was supposed to inspire and motivate employees to do their best. It ended up having the opposite effect. Likewise, when I was constantly working unpaid overtime at various jobs, I was never even given a thank you, let alone the offer of payment or time back in lieu. That certainly grated with me that my commitment wasn't appreciated, so I decided to take my work ethic elsewhere. Big or small, your efforts deserve to be recognised if you've gone over and above. In the classic book How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie stresses that the thing people most want is to feel appreciated. Number 5, physical signs. Shakira said, "Your hips don't lie." I'm going to take it a step further and say your body doesn't lie. Stress and anxiety can manifest itself in various forms. Most often, it's how you feel physically. I can remember in my last job, I had one particular client where a number of my students were based. The client was very demanding, and the main point of contact who I had to deal with there was just awful to everyone. I used to hate going to the office so much that I'd get physically ill, vomiting and worse, just before I had to leave for their office. I was petrified of this woman. Whenever I left their offices, I was fine, but the dread of going in there got me every single time. Whilst working that same job, there were other general physical signs that showed that it wasn't the right fit for me. Things like not being able to sleep because I was always thinking about work, often even getting up and starting work at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. because, hey, I was awake anyway, so I may as well be doing something productive. It wasn't great for my mental health, as I was never able to fully switch off and recharge my batteries, and likewise that had a knock-on effect on my physical health. Working evenings and weekends when I was supposed to be on holiday was commonplace. I also developed this really intense pain between my shoulder blades and a twitch in my right eye. I'm making myself sound very attractive, aren't I? Essentially, my body was trying to send me a message, and eventually I took note. I quit my job out of the blue. I just decided that I didn't want to do this anymore, and I had to take myself off the hamster wheel. However, even when I left, I still felt like I was brainwashed by the workplace culture. Despite my employment officially ending on the Wednesday at 5 p.m, I was still working on the Friday. My bosses knew I was still working, and I never even got so much as a thank you, let alone an offer of payment for all the extra hours that I'd worked. In the end, my husband had to sit me down and have a serious word with me to snap me out of that spell. I was fortunate that after that I was able to take several months off just to do nothing but rest, recharge, and find myself again. I'm so grateful for that time, as it was invaluable for both my physical and mental health. If you're experiencing unacceptable levels of stress that mainly seem to stem from your job, you need to seriously consider whether it's worth the impact on your physical and mental health. You may think that you can carry on in the short term, but if nothing changes, then that soon turns into the long term, and that in itself can have long-term effects on you. Number 6, you've reached the top of your game. This doesn't necessarily mean that you've reached the top of your organisational hierarchy. But if you've reached the limits of what you can and want to learn from the role, you may start to feel frustrated or unchallenged. There is certainly a sense of pride in having your colleagues look at you as the oracle, but it can also feel disappointing when there's nothing new and challenging to stimulate you. Work can become quite tedious when you've seen it all and done it all. Being the font of all knowledge can also be a double-edged sword. It often means having to pick up the slack or lend your knowledge or expertise to other areas of the business. It becomes expected that you'll help out because you know everything, and before you know it, you're snowed under with your own job and 10 other people's work to do too. Research shows that the thrill of learning is linked to levels of happiness. Positive experiences activate the nucleus accumbens, accelerating the learning process. Not having that opportunity at work can ultimately drain the satisfaction out of your job. If this is you, it may be time to take on a new challenge that will afford you the opportunity to learn and grow. This may even be something that your organisation can support you with internally, but if not, a change of scenery may be the best option. That wraps up today's Courageous Conversation, and now it's time for Hero of the Week. This week's Hero of the Week award goes to Officer Erica Aria. Her quick thinking saved the life of a 66-year-old disabled man. Officer Aria just happened to be in the area. She noticed the man trying to cross the railway tracks and that his wheelchair had become stuck in the tracks. Suddenly, the barriers started lowering as the train drew closer. With no time to spare, Officer Aria pulled the man to safety seconds before the train passed. Body cam footage shows just how close a call this was. To put it in context, there were only 15 seconds between the officer exiting her vehicle and the train crossing where the man had been. The man suffered an injury to his leg and was taken to hospital, but thankfully he's alive, all because of Officer Aria's selfless heroism and quick reaction. Now it's time for the positive note. This week's positive note is from Paul F. Davies. Go where you're celebrated, not merely tolerated. Thanks for listening, take care of yourself, and bye for now. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Courageous Conversations podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to access your podcasts. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in to next week's episode, and until then, take care. Bye for now.